Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. The transfer window has shut. It is closed. It has slammed itself down upon our fingers as we tried to keep it open. It is done. Ferme. It is finished. Finished? That is not even a thing. Oh my goodness. We got through it though. We got through the transfer window. It was alright. It was frustrating. It was painful at times. There's some weird stuff happened. But we came out the other side. Kind of feel like Spurs are probably a better squad now than the one they started it with, which is a good thing. Obviously, some of that squad is injured currently right now. But I think overall, wouldn't say it was an incredible window, but definitely some big positives in it. And we'll talk about that in this. You know, it is a bit of a transfer window wrap. I said to my wife that I've got to do a transfer window wrap, and she was horrified because she thought it was going to be like a proper 8 Mile thing, and I was going to start dropping some fat beats, spitting some bars, whatever it is the kids say. I don't even know if that's something the kids say. But hey, I think I'm giddy because we've got through the transfer window. It is always, you know me, it's kind of international breaks, transfer windows. No, international breaks, transfer windows, did I have the wrong way around? And then just football. I just love football. I just want to write and report and talk about football. Everything else is just kind of gets in the way. But look, I get as excited as anyone else when they sign a new player. I get as down and disappointed as everyone else when they fluff a transfer. Or someone else comes in and steals your player. But look, yesterday brought some activity. It is late in the window. It is deadline day. So Tottenham, of course, decided they were going to do a few bits and pieces. I'm very aware that the light, for some reason, behind my phone is going a little bit crazy. So apologies if I'm kind of going like, doing weird things. We got a new signing. We got a new signing for me to report on, for all of us to enjoy, hopefully. Bit of an unusual Spurs signing, but we'll go into that in a little bit more depth later. Randal Kolo Muani. We've spoken about him in the past. He is now going to be wearing a Tottenham shirt. We've got a couple of late departures in the window, which very kindly extended my working day when there's me thinking 7 o'clock, yay! It was not a 7 o'clock finish by any stretch of the imagination last night. But Muani, let's talk about him first. Comes in, takes the number 39 shirt. 26 years old, France international from PSG. Reportedly a €5 million move, which is about £4.3 million. Juventus looked like they were going to bring him permanently to Turin after the half-season loan he had there. Decent half-season loan. 8 goals, 16 Serie A, I was trying to remember the name of the league. Serie A matches, so a goal every other game. Champions League experience, more further Champions League experience there as well. Comes with this ready-made pedigree for Spurs. Further, just experience really into obviously a young squad. 31 caps for France. He's adapted and scored decent numbers of goals now in Ligue 1, the Bundesliga, Serie A, like I've struggled to say. Also played in the Club World Cup in the summer too. So he's got a lot of experience. He's got a really good physical attributes, pace, ability on the ball, scores goals. Yeah, he could probably get higher numbers of goals. I think he had the one terrific season at Frankfurt, was it, when everyone was raving about him. And he could definitely improve his goal tally. But I think physically he should fit into the Premier League. And certainly he's proven that he can go to different countries and adapt quite quickly, which is another massive thing. We've got Thomas Frank's first words on him were, Randal is a quality player. I don't know why every time I hear the word Randal, I think of the character out of, is it Monsters, Inc.? I think it's because my daughters used to always joke about Randal. Randal is a quality player who's proven himself over a number of years, playing for big teams in the Champions League and also with good experience to the France national team. He's a good age in the prime of his career, has good qualities that will suit both us and the Premier League and give us a different option in the final third, being able to play out wide and through the middle. It's interesting we said out wide first. We're all excited for what Randal can add to the squad and I'm looking forward to working with him. Muani himself said, I'm really... Muani. Sorry, I was thinking of Disney characters there to go with the Randall stuff. Moana. Is Moana, is it? Moana. I've been out of the Disney watching game for a while because my daughters are too old for that really now. Well, they should kind of are. Anyway, I'm waffling badly here. Muani said, I'm really happy, really satisfied. I'm very proud. I can't wait to meet my teammates and all of the fans and start to play. I can't wait to get out on the pitch and show what I can do. I'm a player who fights hard for the badge. I fight for the fans, for the club, for the badge. He did say badge twice in that. I like to make runs in behind to help my teammates score, to score goals myself, and to work hard for the team. When he was asked what his qualities are he'll bring to the squad, he said, my combativity, a lot of goals too, whether through assists or scoring myself. I hope to bring lots of goals and points for my new club. So, yeah, good. Like I said, it's a very un-Spurs move in that it is a loan move without an option or an obligation. That's not something Tottenham do. They don't normally say, hey, give us your player, we'll try to improve them for you. That's not what they do. They try and get an option in there. Of course, as this loan goes on, if it's really flying along, they could start to try to initiate talks with PSG, who they do have a very good relationship with. The hierarchies of both clubs get on pretty well, I think, from everything I understand. I think they've all been involved in, is it like the European board? I can't remember what it's called now, the football board. European Council? I don't know. But whatever it is, they know each other pretty well. And you've got Vinay Venkatesam's coming from Arsenal. I think he already had a decent relationship with them too. But yeah, so the problem is if you don't have an option secured, if Muani comes in and absolutely flies and is brilliant, his price tag just goes and just flies up, and then everyone will want him, and Tottenham will struggle to, well, unless they have he enjoyed himself so much that's the only place he wants to go. That could be one thing. But I think in January he wanted to go to Juventus over Spurs at that point. So, yeah, we'll see what happens. So the key thing here is Spurs have kind of gone against type in not a bad way, I think. We're going to talk about the overall context of it. What I want to try and do with this video is delve inside, open up the transfer window and have a little stir around and dig inside and see why things happened, what happened, the good stuff, the bad stuff, and we'll come out the other end of it and we'll all chat about exactly what we felt about it overall as a package. I want your comments. I want everyone's kind of thoughts on this. It'll be great because I am fascinated to hear what people think, because there were points in this window it was rubbish and we were all saying it was a dreadful window. I think we're at a stage now where it's a decent window but not a great window, I think. I'll see if I convince myself otherwise as this chat goes on. So let's look at it. This was a window that I think in some ways was very different to what had come before. Different ways of approaching it. In some aspects, some very classically, frustratingly similar ways of approaching it. Some situations that came up that we've never seen before. Even as a reporter, that was quite interesting and also very painful to write about. It was a summer for me when, how do I put this? There were a lot of cooks in the kitchen, I think is a good way to put it. There was a new head coach, of course, Thomas Frank, who had his very particular requirements for the ingredients he wanted as part of this Spurs stew, let's call it. And then you've got technical director Johan Langer, you've got head of scouting Rob McKenzie, trying to mix everything he wants together for him to then come up with data and reports and this perfect list of targets for Thomas Frank to go through and either go yay or nay. Swipe left, swipe right, as it were. By his own admission, Thomas Frank, that's an ongoing process with Spurs and the recruitment staff of understanding exactly what he wants, so he doesn't have to be. I haven't done this. I don't know which way swipe right or swipe left is because I've been married for many years, so I don't have to do that. Whatever the right one is, he hasn't been having to cast aside. In Brentford, he wasn't having to do that because there were players that were right for him. Whereas at Tottenham, it's very much a case of, what exactly does Thomas want? Let's figure it out. And so the chats over it were much longer. He kind of told me that when I asked about it I can't remember if it was in the summer, in the tour maybe. But either way, it's the same with the coaching staff as well. He's trying to get those coaching discussions down to what they were. And look, to be fair, straight off the bat, he was at Brentford for almost a decade. So it's not like, at Spurs, he should be going straight in there and completely understand what he wants. At Brentford, it took a long time to build up the relationship with the recruitment staff. So he's getting there with Spurs. I think having Johan Langer as someone he's known for years helps. But certainly they're going to need to know exactly what he wants. And in that kitchen as well, we had another cook in the background, presumably making things like pasta and pizza and various Italian dishes. Focaccia maybe in the background. Was Fabio Paratici. Obviously, Spurs previously banned managing director of football, who's been a consultant before he returns to an official role in the weeks ahead. I've said this before, he apparently works quite well with Johan Langer, very different skill sets, very different areas of expertise in the recruitment world. Langer more the kind of the data, probably not unfair to say the more modern way of working in the recruitment world, whereas Paratici is the contacts man, the smooth-talking charmer in the boardrooms that can kind of grease the wheels of getting deals done with his ability to talk to the powers that be, I think is maybe the best way to put it. One, a very showman-like character. One, a very quiet kind of behind-the-scenes kind of guy. Both work in different ways in that respect, but if you kind of mould it all together, if we're continuing with the ingredients, it makes an interesting concoction. So you had all of them. You also had Daniel Levy, of course. We know the very famous or infamous, depending on your viewpoint, ingredient himself in transfer deals. And then you've also got on top of that a new CEO in Vinay Venkatesan that we mentioned earlier. I mean, Thomas Frank has name-checked all of them, barring, I don't think he's mentioned Paratici at any point, presumably because he's been more this unofficial presence, this lurking in the shadows kind of character, until the UEFA Super Cup. And the Udine, as I said before, right in front of me, sat there next to Johan Langer in the Spurs directors area. But yeah, you've got also, if you want to throw another kind of cook in the kitchen into all of this, you've got CAA Base, the big, powerful company you might have heard me spoken about before, who represent loads of the Spurs players, first team, academy throughout, long-standing, kind of powerful presence within Spurs. I've known Daniel Levy for years, the owners of that company, and people that he trusts and will help and advise him in certain scenarios as well, and will sometimes, if they don't represent the player, will broker deals as well to help out Tottenham. So yeah, with all of that, you've got a lot of different voices that all kind of need to align behind, I guess, what's best for Thomas Frank in the transfer window. And again, when it comes to the transfer window, there is a natural slowing down of it this year because of the decision to dispense with Ange Postecoglou. I think there's no doubting this would have been a very different transfer window had they not changed manager or head coach, because you would have rolled straight into what the recruitment decisions were that had already started to be made. Whereas with a new head coach, you do kind of rip it up and start again, and that new head coach has to come in, analyse the squad, and decide on certain players, certain positions, what he needs and everything. There's a natural slowing down. But one of the things that Thomas Frank very quickly came in and made clear, which thankfully for all of us aligned with what Postecoglou had already said, was like, ready-made players now, please. That's great. We loved your little experiment last season with essentially creating a preschool, sixth form technically. Now we want ready-made players. You want to compete in all competitions. Give me ready-made starting 11 players rather than squad fillers. That's the key thing. And yes, last summer did not do that. Dominic Solanke and a group of teenagers, sounds like you're recreating the Goonies or something. It's not what you need to compete on all fronts in any shape or form. So Spurs needed starting 11 improvements this summer. And if we're looking at in purely that sense, I think they succeeded. I think you've got to give absolute credit where it's due. Mohamed Kudus, João Palhinha, Xavi Simons, and Randal Kolo Muani. all got that experience. They've all played in the Champions League and the quality to, if they're not already starters, to become starters. Kota Takai, probably the only youth signing. And even he's not young, he's 20 years old, but experience-wise, not on the levels of the other guys at all. He's probably the one that's more towards the future. Matisse Tell's loan, obviously, from Bayern has made permanent. He's a bit of both. He's a bit of now, he's a bit of the future. He's obviously is young. Is he 20 now, I think? So, yeah, I think it was so crucial to improve the starting 11. To do 4 of your starting 11 improved, I think is a big thing. I mean, that is, I was trying to think back to the other times. I think Postecoglou's first summer, we had Madison, Vicario, Van der Ven and Johnson, who ended up becoming a main starter. That's probably was the last occasion, although I would argue that these 4 players are probably, in terms of when they're signed, at a higher status. Is that the way to put it? I'm not saying that they're better players or worse players or whatever, but I would say in terms of profile, probably bigger. I mean, you're taking Kudus, who was like one of the Premier League's kind of stars, I guess. I know he had a tougher season at West Ham, but he was one of West Ham's better players. Paulinho, again, I suppose it's a similar situation. A tough season at Bayern, but was one of the Premier League's better players when he went there. And he's a Bayern Munich player. Xavi Simons is a bit of a star, we know that. And Muani is kind of a big name in the European game. So, I mean, let me know. Where do you think that 4 against that 4 sit? And yeah, look, if you're going to sign players that improve your starting 11, you naturally have a knock-on effect to the squad. The squad becomes better. It's the best way to improve it. Don't just sign players that fill out the squad. Sign players that are better than your starting 11, and then the squad becomes stronger as a whole. Of course, the signings of Xavi, as I think is supposed to be pronounced, was a coup. That was probably the biggest coup of the lot, wasn't it? As I've said before, even had players inside Hotspur way excited about it, asking staff whether it was done or not. And, you know, he is a special player. And whether he is used as the number 10, obviously with Madison and Kulusevski out, or whether he could eventually, who knows, become the left-wing player. He could be the direct replacement for Sonny. He literally has his number. He's number 7. You know, said it way back at the start. Sonny was the only player this summer when Thomas Frank rang all the senior stars when he first joined to tell him that he wanted to leave the club. He has now departed. It was the summer of phone calls, really, when you think about it, because he had a fair few phone calls, Thomas Frank, to make, not only to the new Spurs players. He spoke to various Brentford players to say his goodbyes. They rang him to wish him well in his new kind of venture. Some of them said they wanted to come and play for him. Some of them said they already had moves to other clubs that kind of lined up and ready or wanted to go. And many of them, of course, just wanted to say good luck and they were staying at Brentford and everything. I'm not saying he was trying to take the team or anything. But yeah, I mean, the one phone call probably that defines this summer is going to be Morgan Gibbs-White apology call to Thomas Frank, isn't it? Oh my word, that was a phone call and a half. Wow. I think I still have kind of just flashbacks to trying to report on that and how horrendous that was. I know it's horrendous from a fan point of view, but from a media point of view, to report on something as being done, then not being done, then not really sure what was happening with this weird limbo we were all in, and then eventually the ending to it was what no one expected. I said this again before when we were during this window, that people inside Spurs, people in the game that have, you know, done deals, looked after players, everything, any possible job you can think of in the game, they've all told me the same thing. What happened with the Morgan Gibbs-White deal is stuff they've never seen happen in a transfer pursuit before, which only Tottenham like to do new things. They like to break boundaries and create new scenarios. I mean, God, we had legal threats. We had a secret release clause that no one truly knows whether it was actually triggered or not. We know there were 2 big bids from Spurs. The one that they thought seemed to have triggered the bid, and then another one afterwards to try and sort things out. I a player that absolutely seemed set on coming to Spurs and made it very clear to Spurs that was the case, and then signed a new contract. It's like, what? Out of the blue. He's the most frustrating thing. I'd actually say, and this is, you may disagree with me, for me, Morgan Gibbs-White, the whole transfer saga, is more frustrating than any of the Eze stuff. And I know a lot of people desperately wanted Eberechi Eze, but for me, he was such a key part of this transfer window and the planning, because Morgan Gibbs-White was Thomas Frank's top choice for the number 10 role. He ticked every box of data as well on the recruitment team's kind of search for exactly what he wanted, and it aligned with who Thomas Frank had already said he wanted. He wanted him since his Wolves days. Spurs had wanted him for years as well. Spurs were convinced they were going to sign him. And then this player who had resisted any form of a new contract for, I think it was 9-10 months, suddenly signs a new contract. He's done that interview since that we spoke about where he said he just had to do the best for his heavily pregnant fiancée who had to go into hospital with stress-related issues with the pregnancy, and thankfully the baby was born. I think it was a little boy, wasn't it? But still, I just think that was the killer transfer of the summer that failed, because in my mind, I still think they would have gone for, had the scenario opened up where Xavi Simons was available, I think they would have signed him as well. Because don't forget, they were signing Morgan Gibbs-White as well as James Maddison. They already had the plan to have two number 10s. And I think had you had Morgan Gibbs-White and Xavi can play on the left, like I said. You'd have had your Son replacement there and Gibbs-White, who is the archetypal perfect Thomas Frank number 10. So that was that for me. And I think it knocked the club for 6 for a long time. It really did. They scrambled for weeks. We moaned about it. I moaned about it. I ranted a bit. We then had the Maddison injury as well. And everyone's like, what are you doing? There's no number 10 or creativity in this team whatsoever. And eventually they get wind that Arsenal are, pulling back a bit on Eze. And they sense this kind of opportunity to strike for, again, a long time target, a base client as well. You'd think that would make it easier. And I think they always had this awareness that if Arsenal did come into the picture, game over. Because he was an Arsenal fan growing up, released from their academy, desperately wanted to go back and play there. I think they knew that. So what they needed was a quick conclusion. Enter any meeting, seemingly, between Daniel Levy and the Palace chairman, Steve Parish, which is just like that, seemingly. Going back to Monsters Inc., is it Monsters University? Where you've got the really slow sloth, I can't remember. But talks between those two just does not seem to work. I think it was all over the structure, the add-ons, everything took an age. And when Spurs eventually did give in and agreed to the terms, too late. Because that team from down the road decided, do you know what? Let's go for it, actually. And thanks for sorting out all the price as well. And he only had eyes for one person. We've heard about the phone call and everything. So absolute disaster. Embarrassing all round, really, as well. Regardless of whether he was always going to go there, I think it was just a massive slap in the face for Spurs by their local rivals. The fans were so upset as well. And it just felt like this moment where Spurs had made these huge declarations. Daniel Levy and we've got to win the Champions League. We've got to win the Premier League. We've got to compete. I mean, he sacked Postecoglou so he could compete across all competitions. And here Spurs were losing out to their local rivals, having spent relatively so little compared to everyone else. And we'll talk about the money spent in a bit. There was very little evidence at that point to suggest that Spurs were making any attempt, or Levy was making any attempt, to turn his words into actuality. And there's further frustrations, of course, there were with Savinho, another one of Thomas Frank's top targets, the Man City winger. Spurs were willing to spend big money on him. He wanted to come, knowing, I guess, he'd start week in, week out in a World Cup year as well. But there was this split inside City over a player that I think they were just worried it'd be another Cole Palmer situation. And that just felt like it might happen, but it was going to be a case of constantly pushing, and ultimately, of course, it didn't in this window. You had Nico Paz at Como, which always felt like a non-starter, really, because of the whole Real Madrid situation. If you're not aware, they've got a clause where they can match any bid that comes in, and they've also got their own clauses to buy him back very cheaply, I think, in a future window. And it's his dream to go back to Real Madrid, where he came through the youth academy and be a star. So he will. Como have said he will eventually. So it was all looking a bit like, ugh. And then suddenly, a name on the list, which was in the unavailable column, went right across the available column. I don't know why it whistled, but it did. Suddenly, Xavi Simons, Chelsea stalled, and Spurs were like, hello, there's a very good player we can actually get who we've kind of identified would be perfect in this system. And thankfully, this time, things moved quickly. He was sold on the project. Thomas Frank played a massive part in it in terms of presenting everything really well. He spoke to us about this before we asked how he does these meetings with players. We know what Postecoglou's were like. Everyone raved about the storytelling he'd do and the way he charmed and won them over. Thomas Frank is a different kind of speaker. He is very honest and direct, and he will tell you not only what you're good at and where you can be in his team, but what you need to improve on and what he's going to improve about you. And that was what sold Xavi Simons. He's done a nice interview, because he's obviously on international duty now, with Eindhoven's Dagblad, it's in, where he said, the manager told me a lot. Positive things, but also things I need to improve. It's fantastic how he sees football, how he wants to make players better. Spurs is the right place for me to develop. It is great that he was honest, that he wants to improve things for me. I always think the coaches are the most important people to base a decision on. As a player, you see a coach more than your family. What needs to be improved? I need to keep that to myself. But I heard different things from Thomas Frank than from other coaches in the past. That makes sense. When I went to PSV, I was much younger, so you have to work on different things then than you do now. So yeah, huge props towards Thomas Frank for being a key part of getting that deal done. And of course, he also, Xavi, I think it's Xavi, it's meant to be pronounced, even though it sounds weird from an English perspective. Xavi also obviously knows Wilson Odobert from PSG time when he would drop down into the under-19s, and Mickey van der Ven from international duty, where they will both be together right now. So yeah, unlike the talks with Palace, painfully drawn out talks, negotiations with RB Leipzig, like a steam train. Within 48 hours, I think he'd done his medical. He'd signed a big deal, which I think is the longest in the club's history, maybe 5 years plus an option for 2 more. Pretty sure I've never heard of a player having a 7-year deal in total at Spurs. Spurs got this new thing that you'll no doubt find as frustrating as journalists do, where they've stopped announcing the length of contracts. I think it only leads to ambiguity and actually more issues. But hey, that's just me. I think maybe, I don't know, I'm just guessing maybe they're tired of all the contract talks that comes around Spurs players when they've got a year or 2 years left, whatever. But it's a big, long deal. It's a show of faith of Spurs in the player, that he can become a superstar. It's a show of belief in him, in the project he's joining, to sign such a long-term deal. Trust me, there's been a few players at Spurs over the years that have signed long deals, and they've maybe regretted being tied in for that long. Hopefully this is a different Tottenham Hotspur now. And look, I think he is going to become the team's big star. I hope so, because, I said this the other day, that Club Shop had like hour-long waits for printing the shirts ahead of the match the other day, and so many people getting Xavi 7 on them as well. Other successes in the window, of course, Christian Romero's new deal. Not going to say it's like a new signing, but it was definitely a statement of intent, I think is the best way to do it. It was a big message to the rest of the squad as well. If your big kind of captain, World Cup winner, 2-time Copa America winner is saying, yeah, I like this, I'm going to stick around, I can see what we can do, then that's a big sign. Jed Spence got his second new contract within 10 months or so. So there were good deals to do. More to come. I think they need to get Bentancur's deal done, obviously. And look, we're talking about criticisms of the window. I think you'll have known, I'm not painting this as a perfect window by any stretch of imagination. I think the criticisms still need to be there, that too much was done too late in the window, as usual. Albeit some of it dictated by that Gibbs White blow. I think you get Gibbs White done that 48 hours or so where they would have done Kudus and Gibbs-White would have been seen as a wow moment, I think, in a window at Spurs. It would have been a crucial building block weekend or so, but it wasn't to be. And I think, like I said, it was like they were a punch-drunk boxer, like just stumbling about in the ring for a little while. And that meant that they were still scrabbling away in the final few days. Obviously, they got Xavi, and then on deadline day, it was a little bit like, what are they going to do? How are they going to sort out the final parts of the jigsaw? We know that they wanted an attacker, a winger essentially, and also a left-sided centre-back as well to cover, the unavailability of last season with the centre-backs. I think that was probably the most difficult deal for them to do. They really struggled to find a player of the required level that was also willing to come to the club and potentially play second field to Romero and Van de Ven, really. I know other clubs seem to do it, and I'm not excusing it. It just seems to be something that Spurs have struggled with. Let's, for instance, say a player like Manuel Akanji. Why would he want to swap City's bench for Tottenham's? I think, where are you going? Was it Milan in the end? So I can kind of understand the thinking of why would I do one for the other, even though we know he's probably going to play a lot of games, but the player is probably not going to see it like that. And in the end, when it came to the defender, they decided to stick rather than twist, because Thomas Frank, anyone that was offered to him, he didn't feel was the required level to actually make that move on. And of course, you might rightly say, hello, Luka Vuskovic, what happened there? Well, he was given the choice. Does he want to go out on loan with all the many other ones that have gone out from the academy especially, or did he want to remain as cover for things like the Cups and if there was any problems? And what I actually thought was quite important, because it explains it better than I can, better than anyone else can, was he did this great, really brutally honest interview in Germany. It was on a website called Germanijack, after going to Hamburg on loan. And I'll just say his words, because I think it does explain it better than I can. He said, yes, they offered me an option to stay, to play in case of injury or cup matches, but I wanted continuous minutes. They have Romero and Van de Ven playing there, two of the best centre-backs in the world at the moment. I believe in myself, but it's really difficult to play next to them. I face them and I realise that I still have to work harder. A lot of work and a little luck, so I'll be back. I thought that was just such a hugely mature thing for a young 18-year-old to come out with. Because look, there would be a lot of people, and I would have loved to see him stay as well. I think there were a lot of people out there that would have just said, no, he was good enough. He should have been there. He should have been starting or whatever. But here you have the actual 18-year-old himself saying, no, I wasn't at that level. I just felt that I wasn't able to match what they were doing. Knowing that he's got to go away, continue to learn. He's still just 18. I've said this before. I think there was just this feeling his defensive side of his game still needs to keep improving. So obviously this terrific attacking threat, but defensively he needs to keep learning. And that's what he'll do at Hamburg. I think it will be hopefully a really good loan for him. So that was a defender aspect as well. And I guess the other thing is you bring in another defender, maybe you are blocking Vusković's path if he comes back more of a ready-made thing. And you've got Kota Takai as well. The attacking player was the final piece in the puzzle, though. I guess Spurs had to decide, or Thomas Frank had to decide, do you bring in... I suppose you have to go back to Savinho. Can you get Savinho in a future window? Is there a belief you can do that? And if so, is it worth bringing another permanent player instead right now? That's, I guess, the dilemma they were kind of thinking about. And we know there's different sides to that. There's risks associated with both sides of that as well. Waiting, but also bringing in someone that maybe doesn't end up being that good and you have to shift them on. Ademola Lookman was offered to Spurs, I know, numerous times during this summer, as he was to a lot of other clubs, let's put it that way. In the end, Spurs decided against it, and actually I don't think anyone else has. I looked at it, I think maybe, is it Turkey potentially, has been mooted as a potential opening offer, ending, destination, whatever the right word I should be saying is. In the end, they went for Muani. I think there's various reasons behind that. I do feel like with Dominic Solanke's ankle issue, maybe just waiting to see what happens with that. From what I've been told, he's had injections in it. and they're waiting to see whether it settles over these 2 weeks of the international break, then kind of go from there. But I guess bringing in Muani, who can play through the centre, and that's his main natural position, you are covering yourself if a worst case scenario comes out of Solanke's ankle problem. I did find it quite interesting that after the signing, he put up a photo of himself in the Tottenham in the Hotspur Way gym. And of course, don't forget Richarlison. Richarlison, Saturday aside, has had a terrific start to the season, but fitness-wise, he does have these doubts over him, of course. And I think the fact that he can also play on the left or the right, Muani, it's, I guess, a bit like Richarlison can as well. It just gives you something a little bit different. And I mean, you look at those, there's a lot of pace now in the side. Muani, Xavi, Kudos, that is, deal with all of that coming at you defences. That's going to be very interesting to see how that all works and how that ties up defenders trying to deal with Tottenham's attacks. Quite excited to see it. It's going to be a hell of a first game back against, is it West Ham away, isn't it? Kudus returning to London Stadium as well. But just fingers crossed this international break does not do anything to mess us all up. Because look, Thomas Frank needs those attacking options right now. Kulusevski is going to be months away from after his patella surgery. From what I understand, the latest is expected to return towards the end of 2025 this year. Potentially not until December. If he's back earlier, it'll be a bit of a quicker than expected recovery. You never know. Again, fingers crossed, because he has been quite a quick healer in the past. Yes, but I think potentially not until December, and if it dips into November, then we've done very well. But the other thing is, I guess you don't want to rush him either. You don't want any kind of reoccurrences of anything. There were a couple of late exits. As I said, Brian Hill has finally left the club after 4 years. One of Paratici's failures, I'm afraid, as much as I love the technical ability he had. He's gone to Girona in a €10 million deal, £8.6 million. Yeah, I looked back when he went. I looked back at asking Antonio Conte after. Do you remember the brilliant game Brian Hill had against Crystal Palace at Selhurst Park? I think he got 2 assists. He was just great that night. And we were all like, yay, it's going to happen. And it didn't happen. But that night I asked Antonio Conte, and I looked back at the quotes, and he'd said, he's a player born to play. He is born to play football. And he compared him to Bernardo Silva and everything. It was like, whoa, kidoki. It's a shame. He's just technically a lovely player. But it's just, I'm sorry, but the scouting, that Paratici decision to think that he was ready for the Premier League, it's up there with thinking Nuno was a perfect fit for Tottenham, really. It's just great player for La Liga, just not for the Premier League. It's I don't know what it is about him, because other players have come that have been smaller, that have been weighed less and everything, but for some reason he just could not handle the physical side of it. And he's admitted himself he found it really difficult. And I think he's back in his happy place of La Liga, and I've no doubt he'll go on to be a really good player. Be interesting to see whether he eventually gets back in the Spain squad and everything, which he kind of dipped into early at Spurs. But yeah, he is no longer a Tottenham player. He did a nice little message on his Instagram saying goodbye. Manor Solomon, my goodness, he was the one that went a bit all over the place last night. More last gasp exasperations at dealing with Palace, I think. Deal sheet had been agreed with both parties signing it, which allows you another 2 hours on the deadline. Spurs had agreed to their terms for this straight loan, only for Palace to pull out. I think there were a few clubs left waiting a little bit by Palace last night, having looked at Liverpool and Mark Gay and everything. But yes, very frustrating for Spurs and Manor Solomon. But to be fair, they acted quickly, and a move very quickly was tied up to Villarreal. La Liga deadline was late. I think it was 10:59 p.m, very exact. And yeah, I guess as a player, you're suddenly having to change your view on I was heading across London, now I'm heading to Spain. He's only played 6 times for Spurs in 2 years. It's mad, isn't it, Manor Solomon? I think Brian Hill's only played 43 times in 4 years. Again, it just shows the recruitment has been so scattergun over the years. It really has. Who didn't go out the door? Is Basuma. Nothing for him as of yet. Dane Scarlett, couldn't get a loan move for him despite that being in the works for a while, or any kind of move. There are a few European windows open. I think a few maybe have closed today. Turkish one I think is open to, it's either the 11th or the 12th. There's some others. We'll see who still heads off. I mean, I feel like if Basuma is going to be on the fringes of things, whether just a move is better for him anyway, if he's going to have 10 months left on his contract where he might not end up playing too much, we'll see. But yeah, look, overall, I do believe Spurs improved their squad for me. By improving 4 starting 11 players, I think you naturally do that. Question marks, I think, will definitely be there over how quickly they acted in various circumstances, and maybe how much they pushed financially as well on certain deals. Could they have moved quicker on Eze and got it done? Could they have moved quicker on Gibbs White? Could they have spent more to make the Savinho decision just impossible to refuse? Could they have pushed earlier and signed Lookman, who's a player that they wanted in the window? Not Lookman, sorry, Semenyo, early in the window. You know, I looked at, the BBC did this table of spending this summer. Footballtransfers.com had provided the figures, and I looked at it. It had 181 million for Spurs and recouping 36 million. I think that 181 million includes the 21 Kevin Danso loan move, which I put on last year personally because it was agreed last year. It was an obligation. So if you're looking at about 160 million, Nottingham Forest on this list spent 205 million. Man United, who obviously Spurs beat in the Europa League final, 216 million. Newcastle, 250 million, albeit offset by the Isak sale. Arsenal, 255 million. Chelsea, 285 million, but remarkably made 288 million in sales because they had to make this profit as of UEFA punishment regulations. And on top of it, Liverpool, an astounding £415 million, while also bringing in 187 million back through the doors. So there's 2 things that stand out to me from those numbers. One, Spurs are horrendous sellers of a footballer. It just shows how much money those other clubs can bring in, and Tottenham just don't. They're just letting players go for almost nothing near the end of their contracts, which suggests that they haven't bought well in the first place, I guess, and that they don't know the right time to sell players. It also tells me a team that finished 17th in the Premier League has probably not spent enough in terms of trying to catch up with us. I know João Palhinha as well, by the way, has an option to buy, so technically you could add that at a later time if you want to it. But, I mean, we were talking about this on the podcast with Guesty earlier, and Guesty quite rightly made the good point that it isn't always about spending the amount of money, it's spending the right money on the right people. And harked back to the 2019 window when Spurs spent bigger money and all of those players were loaned back to their previous clubs and eventually left the club as kind of flops for differing reasons. But look, this window, Spurs have definitely added 4 players of top draw quality, which hasn't always been the case. There's a belief that Thomas Frank can coach the remaining players, like get the full potential out of them. And he was very particular in what he wanted as well, which resulted in such terrific signings, I think, and also would result on players that were passed on. They didn't get all their first choices. You know, even João Palhinha, we know he wanted Christian Norgard, but by the time he was in place and in situ, that had already was set up for him to go to Arsenal. But Palhinha, look, if you're going to have a second choice, they kind of saw that he was perfect to come in as well, and that's been proved to be the case. Like I mentioned earlier, even though for some reason I said Lookman instead, Semenyo was a very strong wing candidate on their list of wingers. But £70 million was his price level. I think a fair few clubs balked at that and obviously ended up signing a new contract because no one went in for him. He's a very good player. I do think 70 million could end up being a bit of a bargain for him. I think someone else. It sounds mad to say 70 million is a bargain. But obviously Spurs then got in ahead of Chelsea, bought Kudus for 55 million, and he's impressed everyone inside the club. I think he's going to be a terrific asset this season. The squad is bloated in areas. I spoke about it in a previous video, but yes, we now know the current club-trained issues and everything. And with the window closed, I can inform you that Spurs have to leave 6 senior players out of their Champions League squad when it is submitted this evening, actually. It's got to be in 3 hours' time when I'm recording this. There's going to be some broken hearts among those Spurs players who will not be able to play in the Champions League. It's not going to be pretty. It's been a really interesting summer in one respect. It's been frustrating as hell in a lot of it. But I think it's been a time of learning for all of the staff to get to know each other. And I think that's reflected in a window that has often felt opportunistic, I'd say, more than carefully and meticulously planned out. That's something that has to change. I guess it's been a summer of success, failures, phone calls, frustrations at what might have been. But I think Spurs believe that they've come out the other side with a stronger starting 11 and therefore a stronger squad. And I suppose the coming months will prove whether that's the case or not, and whether they truly did enough to help him compete in all 4 competitions, as they have declared must be the case. Let me know which 6 players you think Thomas Frank should leave out of his Champions League squad. Do it before. I think it goes in at 11, but I don't think we'll know the squad probably until the morning. UEFA will probably publish it. I've asked this question on social media. I've seen a lot of people leaving out a lot of centre-backs, which concerns me when you think about what happened last season. And it's quite funny that some people are saying we are short at centre-back and then taking out all the centre-backs out of their thing. It's a tough one. I have looked at it. We tried to do it on the podcast as well this morning. Thomas Frank, when I asked him about it on Friday, said it's a minor challenge. I think it's a little bit more than minor. I think there's going to be a few unhappy players because there's kind of risks and traps with whatever you go for and pick. I mean, if you want to know this is a total guess. I don't know who they're going to pick. We'll find out. I think if I was picking it, I think you have to go for Maddison because Maddison will miss definitely will miss the league phase. You can, I think, take 3 out and put 3 in when it comes to the knockout stages. But right now, I would take Maddison out because he's just not going to play. I think, although I've said that Decky will likely be back in December, possibly earlier of push if he's really ahead of schedule. And Dragishin, I think, is back in action. He's supposed to be back in training maybe over this international break. But Thomas Frank said he's going to need at least like a 2-month pre-season before he's really ready to get back into stuff. So I would imagine with that in mind, I think it would be very tough on fit players right now to say we're going to leave you out for 2 players who might be back for the end of this league phase. That, for me, seems like a scenario where you can say to those players, look, we're going to leave you out, possibly. I don't think you can leave out Dragishin and Takai. Personally, I think you need one of them. I've seen some people saying you leave out Ben Davies, but Ben Davies is Mr. Versatile. You know, he can cover you on the left, he can cover you through the central, and Thomas Frank has been very effusive in his praise for Ben Davies and his kind of ability to lead in the dressing room. So he might leave him out. I think it would surprise me, but he might. But I would say if you're picking one of Dragishin and Takai, I think Takai has only missed a few weeks and obviously has played half of the season in Japan. Dragishin has been out since January. So I would go with Maddison, Kulusevski and Dragishin. I think, unfortunately for him, I think Kinski probably has to not be registered. I just think purely because if you register him, outfield is just so horrendous of the amount of players you'd have to leave out. And Luca Gunter hasn't gone on loan yet, which maybe lends itself to him sticking around. And then you've got Vicario, you've got Brandon Austin, you've got a bit of European experience and Premier League experience last season. Yes, it's still a risk. Of course it is. But I just think when you're looking at it on paper, so I'm going for Maddison, Kulusevski, Dragishin and Kinski. Basuma, they were willing to sell. You would imagine that if someone's going to be left out, it's a player that is heading out of the exit door. And then I think if you're doing those ones and you're not putting more centre-backs in there and leaving yourself really short in terms of centre-backs, because look, I know some people say, Archie, I've actually seen some people suggesting Archie Gray is left out. But come on, Archie Gray is your Swiss Army knife. He literally Swiss Archie knife. Swiss Archie knife. Yes. He can play at right back, he can play at left back, he can play at centre back, he can play in midfield. You would be mad to leave him out of your squad. Absolutely mad. So I wonder does it come down to Tell or Odegaard? Because the one area they've got a lot of is wingers. So I wonder if it comes down to those two. Personally, of the two, I'd probably go for Odegaard, just purely because Tell can play across that front three and can play up front as well. Whereas Odegaard can play on the wings and he can play kind of as a 10. I wouldn't say hugely effectively, but he can. I just wonder if he's the one that misses out, which, he's a fan of Odegaard. He really likes Odegaard. So, like I said, I don't think it's the minor challenge he made it out to be. And I don't think there's been a period where there's 6 players that have been left out of the Champions League squad. That is such a mess. It is poor squad management. It is poor to have allowed a situation where Harry Kane, Harry Winks, Oliver Skipp, players like that have all headed out the door, and there's no academy production line coming through. Only Brandon Austin is the only senior club-trained player. I've seen some people suggesting Matty Craig. I get it. So a lot of people were suggesting Max Robson last year, but again, a bit like Max Robson, Matty Craig is nowhere near the first team setup. He's not, from what I understand. I don't think he's been training with the team or anything. I don't even know what's happening with the under-21s and stuff like that. I think we all expect him to kind of head off this summer, but it hasn't happened as of yet. I just would think that would surprise me. I get the logic behind it because he's a player that hopefully will have a decent Football League career and he would be club trained. He would fit in that category, but it doesn't really make any sense for a player that has had no involvement really with the first team to suddenly be put into that role. Occasionally, we might need you once in a blue moon. It doesn't serve him or Spurs any real good. It's just such poor, awful squad management, and also a real kind of either a failure by the academy or a failure of managers and coaches to look at what the academy's got and use it properly and develop them into first team players. I don't know where it lies, but certainly that has just been a poor area of the squad to still be in this position all these years on. Pochettino was telling me, I remember back in 2018, 2019, how heartbroken he was at leaving Juan Foyth out of the squad. I remember Mourinho having to leave Joe Rodon out of the squad and feeling how difficult it was. Now we've got 6 players have been left out. It's only got worse. It's just very, very poor. I mean, the likes of Bergvall and Gray will become, I think, B-list players next season and then club-trained players the next one. So that will massively improve things. But still, should never have allowed to get to this position. But yeah, we'll find out. I think probably in the morning on the UEFA website, we'll have a look. What else has happened? What else have we got? The yellow kit has finally been properly launched. They finally decided to do that. It would say, "Is it okay to come out now?" And they've come out and launched the yellow kit, which is really nice. I do like it. I think the yellow kit, the third kit and the away kit for me are probably some of the best kits in years. They are very good. Home one, not so much, but those two are pretty decent. I think that's kind of everything for now. Like I said, underneath, let me know your thoughts on the window. Give us a rating for it. I think I gave it a 7 on the podcast this morning. So give me your thoughts. I want all these things checked off in the comments. I want your thoughts on the window. I want a rating for it. And I want the 6 players that you would leave out of the Champions League squad and the reasons why as well. So I'm expecting lots of lovely detailed comments that I can look through. Look. So I'm sorry, there's been a lot of me in recent days. I kind of realised that when I started to record this because I did the one on, was it Friday night? I did one on after the Xavi news. I did one late on Saturday night as well after the match. And here I am again on a Tuesday night. So sorry you've had to see a lot of this and hear a lot of that. But yeah. I'll probably next time give it a few days, maybe pop back on at the weekend. Probably do a loan roundup. It's about time we did one of those. I saw Will Lancashire scored again for Oxford, which is great. I also do a Q&A. So if you're already in those very detailed comments, if you want to leave some questions, that'd be nice as well. We'll have a bit of fun with some Q&A stuff too. Right. On that note, I shall head off. Enjoy the rest of these few days of the international break, as boring as they can be. But look, hey, we've got some players we'll want to see in international action, most notably Xavi Simons, of course. And also Jed Spence on England duty. It'd be great to see if he gets some game time too. And just everyone, please stay fit. That would be wonderful. Right, time to head off. as always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves. I shall catch you later. Goodbye.